Good morning. I'm Anita Huberman. I'm CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this very important topic of cybersecurity for businesses. It's been an ever-changing and so important topic, especially in these past 2 years during the pandemic. Not always top of mind for the business community, but the Surrey Board of Trade and CyberCatch and the RCMP are committed to ensuring that we are educating the business community about protecting their businesses, protecting their workforce. I'm also an honorary captain of the Royal Canadian Navy as appointed by the Defense Minister of Canada. And we acknowledge that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of our Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kaikut, Tawasin First Nations. We also acknowledge that we are on the land of the Inuit and Métis peoples, and acknowledge that they have a very traditional and important relationship to the land and water surrounding our great city of Surrey. Everyone, events like this simply do not happen without sponsorship. Thank you so much to our progress partners of the Surrey Board of Trade. They are the law firm of Fasken, BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, Scotiabank, the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan represented by SNF Benefits, and Western Community College. Also, thank you to our government officials that are in the Zoom room this morning. They are City of Surrey councillors, Linda Annis and Brenda Locke. And also joining us is former Surrey RCMP Assistant Commissioner, but now Deputy Chief Bill Forty, Niagara Regional Police Service, and of course, the former Surrey RCMP officer in charge. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for attending. Just some instructions before we begin. All attendees are muted. If you do have a question for any of the panel speakers, please put them in the chat function of the technology. We will get to them during the question period. If we're not able to get to your question, we'll respond by email after the event. I just wanted to remind you that the whole purpose of the Surrey Board of Trade is to support business, bring business into the city. We are Surrey's city building business organization. We're one of the top 10 largest chambers of commerce, boards of trades in the country. There are 430 of us. And we deliver our services through a very diversified service portfolio with our very unique actions related to instigating change at the different levels of government, on government advocacy, business support, international trade support, workforce support, and also enhancing the livability of our city. And that is why it is so important for us to have a partnership that we announced in early April with CyberCatch to ensure that we have a tool, a platform to ensure that our businesses are looking at the compliance standards for cybersecurity to protect their businesses, their economic assets that they've worked so hard for, and also to protect their workforce. We are creating a cybersecurity center of excellence right here in Surrey. And we're looking for funding for a feasibility study, but really fashioning ourselves, but a real made in BC solution after the San Diego Center for Cybersecurity. And it will be focused on economic development, workforce and infrastructure collaboration to ensure that we are creating jobs, but also to ensure that we are creating tools to protect business in the face of our ever-changing, not only local, not only national, but global socioeconomic circumstances. And that is why I'm so pleased to be able to introduce our first speaker. And he is Sai Huda. He's the CEO of CyberCatch, a national best-selling author And Sai, first of all, I wanted to ask you, as part of our panel, why now? Why is it that we have to focus on cybersecurity when businesses are so focused, especially after the pandemic, on selling their goods, selling their products? Why is cybersecurity and the solution that you have with the federal government so important right now? Sai.
Anita, thank you. And so honored to be with you and Brian and Andy today. Thank you so much for hosting us and your forward-thinking leadership. Clearly, this has to be top of mind for Canada as a nation, and of course, all organizations, whether they're businesses or non-for-profit organizations. And why now? Because Canada is under attack. Organizations of all types and sizes are having data thefts. They're getting ransomware. And it's because they're going digital. The government is incenting and motivating organizations to go digital. The pandemic was a big factor, as you pointed out earlier. And also the support that Canada has provided to US and its allies against Russian aggression in Ukraine. Those are all factors that are just coming together into a perfect storm and really enabling these bad actors, which include nation states, to really take advantage of poor security. And businesses are digital, but they have poor security. So if we go to the next slide, we can dive right in, Anita, and I'll elaborate a little bit more. Thank you. And share with the audience some really alarming statistics. So recently, Toronto Star reported about a quarter of small businesses in Canada have already said they've experienced a cyber attack. And these are just the ones that have openly shared this in the survey. IBM study recently noted that it costs $5.4 million on average for a Canadian organization to remediate a data breach. That's a lot of money. And attacks are happening. We'll give you some examples. A Canadian medium-sized healthcare organization recently got ransomware 2 times within just a few days. One gang came in and inserted ransomware because they hadn't patched their systems. So it was very easily open from the outside, and they were able to install ransomware. But then another gang found the same vulnerability because these guys were still slow in patching, and they used the same open door to come in and install another ransomware. So this poor medium-sized healthcare organization got 2 ransomware within a few days. And of course, that impacted their operations, patient care, lives were impacted. They had to turn away patients. Recently, one of the customers that we signed up, they are a manufacturer, and they have an assembly plant partner. That partner got hit with ransomware. They were shut down for 1 month, and they were barely able to get back in operations because if it had gone on for a few more days, both companies would have gone out of business. That was a close call. So that's what's happening today in Canada. And if we go to the next slide, we'll elaborate a little bit more and start to share with you, what businesses need to really pay attention to and why the standard and what the standard requires. CyberCatch scanned 21,850 small to mid-sized businesses, internet-facing assets. So these are websites, web servers, appliances that might be exposed to the internet, applications, 21,850. And in both US and Canada, we found 3 key vulnerabilities. You can see the numbers here, but in Canada, 84% were susceptible to spoofing. What spoofing is where the code is so bad on the website that we can, as an attacker, inject malicious code and fool the website or the web server to think it's legitimate command and produce username, passwords, or even the database. That's what's called spoofing, because we're able to spoof or really fool the website or the web asset. 84% of businesses in Canada are susceptible to this. So that's very alarming. And if you go to the next slide, CyberCatch also recently did a blind survey with the help of Momentive, which is a market insights company and the maker of SurveyMonkey. Blind survey means CyberCatch's name as a sponsor was kept confidential because we didn't want the respondents to be biased in any way. And we asked a bunch of questions focusing in on ransomware because this is a really big threat. And 30% of these small to mid-sized businesses said they don't have an incident response plan. The 70% that said they did, 35% of the 70% said they didn't test it recently it was tested 9 months ago or over a year ago, which means about 55%, if you do the math, really don't have a plan to be able to respond to ransomware because either it's not in writing or it's so old that it's outdated and it hasn't been really tested. So that's alarming. And then we asked them, how long could you survive a ransomware attack? 75% said only 3 to 7 days. That's how they could last if ransomware came in, encrypted systems and databases so they couldn't operate. They could only last up to 7 days. So this is very, very alarming. So these are the underlying factors that we have to deal with, and that's the reality. If you go to the next slide, so this is why we are focused on helping Surrey businesses in particular and businesses across Canada. It's a $600 billion plus problem. And the root cause for data theft and ransomware is missing or ineffective cybersecurity controls, like the ones with the healthcare organization example I gave, the manufacturing example that I gave, and many, many others. So the business isn't aware that they don't have a control in place or it's not being effective anymore. It's broken. Controls, of course, are either policies or procedures or technical controls, like a software that helps prevent, detect, or respond to a threat, like a attempted data breach, data theft, or ransomware attack. That's what cybersecurity controls are. And that's the root cause, that because there's missing or ineffective controls of these businesses, the attackers are finding them and getting in. And if you go to the next slide, this is why the Government of Canada, with help of CIO Strategy Council, the CIO Strategy Council is the body in Canada that's been authorized by the Standards Council of Canada to create national standards. And the CIO Strategy Council, because of these reasons, recognized that small to mid-sized businesses in particular, these are organizations that are less than 500 employees, are especially vulnerable. They have limited resources, they're relying on third parties, they might not know what cybersecurity controls they should have or how to implement them. So they need guidance. And so CIO Strategy Council put together this national standard, and it's called Baseline Cybersecurity Controls for small and medium organizations. There are 55 controls that are prescribed in the standard. There are 2 levels. So level 1 is for very small organizations or organizations that have what we call just an informational website. You don't collect any information. It's just basically a postcard type advertising, and you're very small, lower risk. Then the standard prescribes 22 controls for those types of organizations. But if you're anything other than that, where you have a little bit of a higher risk profile, or you have informational exchange or transactional websites, for example, which means you collect information in forms, or you allow login from your website, or you're selling goods, there's e-commerce. So you have more interactivity with the consumer or a business, then you're higher risk. And so those kinds of businesses or anyone with a high risk profile that would be a good target for attackers have to implement 33 more controls. So a total of 55 controls. So what the standard is doing is saying, look, this is not a law or regulation yet, but it's also not just a best practice, kind of nice to do. This really is what every single organization in Canada should really implement minimally as a baseline, 55 controls, and especially if you're small to mid-size, because you are the line of sight for these attackers, because they know you're vulnerable. So, take a look at the standard, take a look at these controls, and adopt it and get secure. So that's what the Government of Canada is doing. And yes, the CIO Strategy Council has put this together. It's available. We'll share more information about it as we cover a little bit more here in the webinar on what these controls are and some examples. But it is the new standard. And what's really awesome in Canada is this is really a leadership opportunity, because there is no similar standard anywhere in the world. I had the personal privilege of helping author this. The Government of Canada invited me to join the CIO Strategy Council. I joined a team of other experts, and we together put the standard together. It's the first of its kind in the world. So we have an opportunity in Canada to together implement these controls, get Canadian business and organizations safe, and create a model for the rest of the world to follow. So with that background, Anita, back to you.
I wanted to mention that Sai is also the author of the best-selling book, Next Level Cybersecurity. And on our website at businessinsurrey.com, there is a section for our Cybersecurity Center of Excellence as we embark on that journey, but also to ensure that businesses can take advantage of CyberCatch, the platform that they have in conjunction with the federal government, so that businesses are looking at the compliance standards. It's not legislation, it's not law to comply, but certainly it is guidance from CyberCatch that our business community has the advantage of being a part of. So any questions, just email us at the Surrey Board of Trade or CyberCatch, and we would be pleased to help you. What's really important for the business community is to know what the next steps are when they do face a cybersecurity threat to their business. Is there a hotline? Do they phone their policing agency? I know the Canadian Police Chiefs Association has been focused on cybersecurity prevention. So we want to hear from our Assistant Commissioner of the Surrey RCMP and Officer in Charge about how they are responding to cybersecurity threats. What is happening in general terms on the ground, but also in terms of what should businesses be doing when they face a cybersecurity threat. So please help me welcome Mr. Brian Edwards. Brian, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anita. It's a privilege to speak today, especially with such distinguished guests. I've got Sai Huda, Andy Kim. These are two of the foremost experts in the field in the world. So I'll make a few comments about what the RCMP is doing, what law enforcement is generally doing. Then I want to frame up cybersecurity in terms of overall crime and sort of historical steps that we take to reduce crime. So firstly, Surrey, as we all know, is one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. It has just so many small and medium-sized organizations. Of course, the RCMP and local police have a duty to protect these organizations. But let me first start with outlining really what we define cybercrime as. And the RCMP defines cybercrime as any crime where there is a cyber element involved in a substantial way. This can be information technology such as computers, tablets, or even smartphones. And then if that helps you in the commission of an offense in a substantial way, then that, of course, is a cybercrime. So we have technology as the target. We define it into two different areas, and technology as the instrument. Technology as the target is the crime can only be committed using the computers, networks, or digital devices. Examples of that would be malicious software to illegally access a computer system, hacking to steal sensitive data, and denial of service attacks. There's a couple of sections of the criminal code we would turn to: unauthorized use of a computer or mischief of data as a mechanism to deal with that. Then there's the second category, and that's technology as instrument. And the internet and information technologies, this is where they play an instrumental role in committing the crime. This is where we get into extortion, fraud, identity theft. This would involve sort of the release of compromising pictures. We get this all the time. These are online scams such as phishing, identity theft, illicit marketplaces, and money laundering. In context, my 80-year-old mother who lives with me, she came upstairs the other night with her iPhone, and she had a page on there. It was a full red page on the phone, and it was telling her that she had a security alert from Apple. And so she was wondering what to do. Thankfully, she did come up and see me. And of course, that wasn't a security alert from Apple. It wasn't involved in the settings, or it's not something that Apple would send. So it's really everywhere. But these investigations are incredibly complex in nature, and I'm going to return to that later because they require specialized investigative skills. And one thing I want people to take away is how I frame this up in terms of traditional criminal activities. Now, as set out in the Government of Canada's National Cybersecurity Strategy, the RCMP has a national cybercrime strategy, and we've developed the National Cybercrime Coordination Unit. We call that NC3 because it's too hard to say otherwise. And what this is a unit that we have in national headquarters, and actually spoke to one of the lead civilians on it last week in preparation for this interview. And it has RCMP officers, and of course, we bring in civilians from various backgrounds because there's so many people out there that are skilled at. Of course, we've got Cy and Andy online today are two examples of that. And the job is to reduce the threat, impact, and victimization of cybercrime in Canada. Let me throw a few stats at you to get this framed up. From April 1st, 2020 to October 2021, NC3 has received over 2,480 requests of operational assistance from both domestic and international law enforcement agencies. And we're just scraping the surface there. And since the beginning of this year, approximately 55% of NC3 requests have involved some sort of ransomware. Cybercrime continues to be the cyber threat that is most likely to affect Canadians and Canadian organizations. Look at my mom. She's walking upstairs with her iPhone. She's not likely to be sort of victimized for too many other things, but there she is sitting in her house and this happens to her. Of course, if people are victims, we want them to report. And there's a couple of ways to report, and I'll indicate that to you later on. And that's important because this is one of the most underreported offenses in Canada. It's probably the most underreported offense. Now, where you get help is your local police. It starts with your local police if something happens. And we have the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. We'll have links to that here, and they can be called or they can be accessed online. And again, that information will be available to assist in what they will do. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Center and NC3 work together to implement new cybercrime and fraud reporting systems. Now, I don't endorse Cybercatch or any particular company. There's a lot of good products on the market out there, so you have to pick what's right for you. But listen, now is where I want to frame this up. And there's a number of people online, and I'm sure everybody locks their doors when they leave their house. For those business owners, you have gates. You invest in cameras. You invest in fences. And that's to do a couple of different things. That hardens your business from risk of break and enters, from people coming in when you don't want them there. And traditionally, how we fight crime is in a couple of different ways. We use social norms. Think about impaired driving. Going back 40 years, people would routinely be at parties, have too much to drink, and they would drive. That is not an accepted social norm anymore. And few people do that, but we still have many impaired drivers. So the acceptability of that has changed. So that's one way that we change activity. The other thing too, again, thinking of impaired driving, for those that the social norms don't sink into their heads, we have detection. If I drive impaired, am I going to be detected? Am I going to be caught? And then thirdly, it's actually the punishment. They don't not drive impaired because of the punishment. It's one, will I get caught? And then subsequently, will I be punished? So let's look at the investments you take in your business, the normal investments, and then let's look at deterrence, let's look at social norms, and then let's look at penalties. We all know, it's very clear that a lot of these attacks come from overseas and other places. So the investigations on these are incredibly complex and incredibly resource intensive. We know even with traditional crimes such as break and enters and persons offenses, that prevention is the dollar spent on prevention, the return on that is much better than fixing things after they happen. If there's an example of this, there is no better example than cybercrime because of the complexity. So let's look at those three factors I talked about, social norms. So if you've got actors in a foreign country or somewhere outside of Canada or even in with Canada, social norms are not going to prevent them from doing this because there's a lot of money to be made. Detection is going to be very difficult, and as Cy had indicated earlier, there's businesses that have been compromised that don't even know. And thirdly, the penalties given overseas actors and the difficulty to trace these, then those three factors are not going to be on the table. I look at small and medium size organizations, and I think about what if they couldn't access their payroll? What if they couldn't access their customer list? And I think it's very critical that the owners and operators of these sizes of businesses frame this up in terms of how we normally deal with crime and look at cybercrime, which has evolved, and prevention and is absolutely essential for this. I recently bought a computer for my son, a gaming computer. He's 14, and of course it had all these specs, most of which I didn't know. But we got home and it didn't have the key for the Windows license because you have to pay extra for that. And I think it was $200. So I debated that for all of about a minute because without the Windows license, the security patches won't work. And I didn't want to lose this investment by not having a patch done. And it was 200 more. And of course, you roll your eyes because it's more money out of your pocket. But for me, in that case, I knew that if it had been compromised, I'm not going to be able to go back to anybody on that. And I needed to invest in that. So we will continue to be proactive. We will continue to assist local law enforcement and have a national strategy and implement that as best as we can. But you do need to really look seriously at steps towards preventing that and using those controls as prescribed under the national standards so that you're not victimized, that you can continue to operate. So I hope that's of some help to the folks that are listening, and I'll continue to remain online if there's any questions at the end. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you so much, Brian. And so I know we're getting some questions through the chat function about what these new national standards are and where to find them. And so the answer is going to be provided by Andy Kim. He is the Vice President of CyberCatch, and he's a former all-state and cybersecurity leader for Citigroup, also based out of San Diego. So Andy, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Anita, and thank you for having me here. I feel privileged to be sharing key insights about the Canada CIOSC standard. So just a quick overview, the Canada CIOSC standard is a broad scope controls document. You heard from Cy today, there are 55 total controls. And one of the great things that went into the creation of this standard is the placement of accountability and responsibility. That's a key thing. The place that these controls reside ultimately is at the top of the house. It really requires a lot of management attention and business owner attention as well. So that is really at the top of the house of where the cybersecurity controls begin. What I'd like to do is go into some specific areas of the cybersecurity controls and sort of address the immediate benefits that businesses can immediately take advantage of as part of understanding the new national standards. The first one I'd like to begin with is the cybersecurity risk assessment section, which is actually in section 4.4. Why are we talking about risk assessments? Well, it's exactly what Assistant Commissioner Brian mentioned, right? I think one of the key things is you've got to know where you stand as an organization, as a business. Many cyber attackers are betting that you as a business don't know where to begin and don't know what your end state is going to look like with the controls that you need. Completely eliminate that from your current business strategy. That's really what a risk assessment is designed to do. A risk assessment is designed to find out where your key information resides. And more importantly, it makes you consider in a very logical way, if indeed a cyber intrusion or a cyber crime were to occur in my business today, what information would they go after? What information is critical? How can I make sure that those assets are protected in the event of a cyber incident? So again, one of the immediate benefits of performing a risk assessment is, again, knowing where you stand and ultimately where you need to be. Now, let's not make the mistake that, okay, I've done a risk assessment, I've crossed the finish line, and you just shrug and say, you know, it's done and I don't need to do it again. That's bad news. Every cyber attacker, every cyber threat actor will bank on the fact that you believe that cybersecurity is a one and done function. Unfortunately, it's not. The cyber attacks every year become more sophisticated, and cyber attackers are very, very much innovative in the forms of attacks that they'll use and the malware that they will create. Therefore, a risk assessment is not a one and done event. It's something that you must do annually, at least, just to account for changes in your business, changes in your IT infrastructure, changes in stuff that you might do in the cloud. Remember, technology moves extremely fast, and changes within your IT infrastructure are moving very quickly. And that's where that risk assessment that you must do on an annual basis will help detect those changes and allow you to maneuver and change and block and tackle against new threats that emerge just because your business has changed and your IT infrastructure, of course, will change with the new business initiatives that you have. So incredibly valuable step within the standard, the risk assessment. Now, the next thing that I want to move on to is the ever urgent need to perform an application security scan. And let me tell you why. From an application security scanning perspective, it's really important that businesses that are digital today have a legitimate and consistent web presence. If your website is down, if your website has some funny pictures and or data diddling all over the website, customers are not going to take you seriously. That's why we really encourage the use of an application security scan, and that's exactly what 6.3 is requiring businesses to do. And in fact, one of the biggest risks that we have today is that section 6.3, the OWASP requirement, is exactly the reason why you want to scan for weaknesses in applications to prevent your website from going down and announcing to the whole world that, yeah, you're not available. Remember, applications is where hackers go because we open the door already. The internet runs on port 443, which is the port that every website resolves against when every customer visits your website. And the hackers know this too. That's why it's so smart that's in the standard that you run an application security scan. It's scanning the vulnerability of the door that's already open to hackers. So it's a must-do control. And lastly, of course, incident response. I can't tell you how many times I have worked with businesses where they talk about, yes, I've been hacked, and they call their local law enforcement authority, and the law enforcement authority asks them, well, do you have any more details than the fact that you've been hacked? It's like, no, we know we've been hacked. we can't do business, our business is closed, can you help us? Unfortunately, the reality is law enforcement it will be very challenging for law enforcement to help you if you don't have an incident response plan. And that's really in section 5.1. The Canada CIOSC standard goes into explicit detail about documenting the security incident. And it gives you step-by-step instructions on the information that you need to collect, even before you call law enforcement. And what benefit is there to that? You know exactly what to provide law enforcement so that they start off on the right foot in the investigation of the security incident that happened in your business. So eminently practical to have an incident response plan, and more importantly, the ability to document the right facts and the log data and the incident data that is ever so important at the time of a security incident, because that ultimately helps your conversations with your customers. It'll help with your conversations with law enforcement, and ultimately have a faster route to making sure that the threat actors are caught at the end of the day. And you know, with that, I'm gonna bring it back to you, Anita, as I've closed out the 3 key controls that I believe are incredibly important in this standard.
Thank you so much, Andy. And Cy, my next question to you is, how do you use the new tool from CyberCatch to cost effectively comply with these new national standards? Not law yet, but certainly guidance for businesses.
Thank you so much, Anita. Absolutely great question. And we're honored and privileged to be partnering with the CIO Strategy Council. They selected CyberCatch, and we put together this one-stop shop solution to make it easy and cost-effective for all organizations in Canada to comply and get secure. So the solution is called CAN CIOSC 104 Compliance Manager, and it's available today. And we're getting lots of businesses already signing up, and a lot are coming on board here shortly. We recently announced this just a few weeks ago, and we were privileged to have the support of the Canadian government directly. The Minister, the Honorable Francois Philippe Champagne, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry in Canada, provided his personal support and his agency and his ministry support. So we're very excited to bring this because it's challenging, as Andy is starting to elaborate. How do you figure out what your risk profile is? How do you figure out what controls you really need to have? And what are the most cost-effective ways to implement the controls? Because it could get costly otherwise. So what we've done is we put together a solution that includes all the controls, but more importantly, there are tools that enable the implementation of the controls very, very rapidly and quickly. And we have a team of cybersecurity experts led by Andy who are there to support the business to figure out what controls they have today, what they need to beef up, and what they need to implement further, and do it very, very rapidly and quickly. So that's part of the value. And if you go to the next slide, I'll elaborate a little bit more. And thank you for the questions that you've been asking. And of course, we'll have a Q&A section here shortly to answer other audience questions. But if you, first of all, go to cybercatch.com, and under compliance, you'll see CAN CIOSC 104, or you can see on the lower left, we're giving you the actual URL. So it's cybercatch.com/CAN-CIOSC-104-Canada. So if you write that down, but just if you go to CyberCatch and click under compliance, you'll find it. So we've created this whole section for CAN CIOSC 104. And there you'll be able to see, first of all, a 6-minute demo. And so you should definitely watch that video, and with your team, it'll explain what the solution is, how it works. And then you should download the brochure to learn a little bit more. But then we have a button that says download the standard. So right there, from there, you can actually be led to the CIO Strategy Council's website. You can go there directly yourself, or from our link here, and be able to download the standard. It's a PDF document, and you'll see all of the 55 controls described, as Andy was giving some examples. But what I recommend also is you download our 15-minute guide. Now, this is put together by CyberCatch, but we are bringing it down. It's kind of like, Reader's Digest version, but on point. So in 15 minutes or so, you and your executive team will be able to get a really good understanding of the standard. And you'll see examples of the controls that are prescribed, and then the consequences and some cases that where these controls could have prevented the data theft or the ransomware attack. So those are some of the tools. Watch the video, download the brochure, download the standard, download the 15-minute guide. But then reach out to us. We can give you another demo that could be about 30 minutes or so to walk you through, and then you would sign up. And here's a couple of pointers. So the first step we would do is we would benchmark you. So we would see what controls you have today between a quick interview process with one of our cybersecurity experts, and using our tool called Cyber Benchmark to see what controls you have and the gaps. That's the first step. And then as part of that, what we do is we create what's called a topology diagram. So with that interview process and that analysis using the tool, we'll figure out where your crown jewels are, which is your key data, and what controls you have today. We'll capture that in a diagram because it's really important. And then we'll see what controls that you need to implement. So that topology diagram with the interview process and the tool enables the gap analysis. And that's the first step you need to do. So that way, then we can get you to the 55 controls. And part of that will be recommendations for a policy or a procedure. We have templates. So our team will give you that to accelerate that. We'll also recommend some technical controls. We're objective. We don't get paid by anybody to recommend anything. So what we're going to be doing is looking for things that are going to cost you nothing or cost you very little. And there are lots of good tools out there. So we'll recommend that. For example, you might need multi-factor authentication for your privileged users. Okay, well, who are privileged users? We'll help you figure that out. And then we'll explain what's available from multi-factor. Some are free that are very, very good. And so we'll give you those kinds of tips. So that's the first thing we do. And then as part of the solution, you also get an online training solution that comes with it, no cost to you, where you'll be able to train your employees to look for phishing and ransomware red flags. That's part of the solution. It's an online solution. It's tailored for Canada specifically. We actually, Brian would like this, have the learner role play a constable, newly hired, and they're going into these two companies that have been hacked in Canada, led by an RCMP, leader. And as they're driving there, they're learning about how these attacks happen. And then as they go and interview these Canadian businesses, they learn about how the attacks happen, and they look for evidence. And so through that interactive process, the employees get really alerted, and they become a human defense line, if you will. So that's part of the solution. But then we don't stop there. The other thing we do is we give you an automated controls testing solution as part of this offering. So we do it 3 dimensions. One is from the outside. So this is what the attackers are doing. They're scanning your IT assets and looking for vulnerabilities. Well, we have a module called Cyber X-ray. And that's what we use for the scan, 21,850 earlier. So we'll be scanning anything that's internet facing for you and looking for vulnerabilities. We'll alert you, and our team will guide you to fix it. So that's part of the solution. That's called outside-in testing. And then we also have you download an agent, and the agent goes into your network, local area network or cloud, and it tests and all the controls that you may have in place that we helped you implement to make sure they're working. So for example, it'll use brute force, which means it'll use a password cracker and see if we can guess passwords for databases, any servers that you might have. And if we were able to crack the code, if you will, we'll alert you and say, you know what, you didn't change the factory default password, or the password is so simple and so easy to be able to guess by an attacker that the agent was able to do that. So alert, let's go change the password to this server, this database, make it tough and not be so easily guessable by an attacker. So that's an example of a test called brute force that the system will automatically run. So we're doing this throughout your network, and we're alerting you, and our team again will help you fix those controls. That's called inside out testing. And then finally, we'll be sending phishing simulation emails to your employees to see if we can fool them, just like an attacker would. And if we're able to fool them, then we'll, of course, we'll alert them to say, hey, this is not a real phishing email, but you could have been fooled. And then we'll alert you in a dashboard, and you can have a chat with your employees to say, hey, pay attention, or maybe go take another training course on CyberCatch. So that's called the human factor testing. So 3 dimensionals, outside in, inside out, and human factor testing. So that's part of keeping you compliant and secure. Because remember what I said at the beginning, the root cause is broken controls, missing or ineffective. which the attackers know and you don't. So if we can alert you to those broken controls, missing controls before the attackers do and help you fix them, then they won't be able to break in. And that's the solution. So it's a very exciting, innovative solution that we put together. And that's why the CIO Strategy Council has chosen us and are partnering with us. And it's available to businesses in Surrey. The other thing I will say, Anita, is as a business in Surrey, and because we're such a so honored to partnering with you, if any business in Surrey signs up for the solution in the next 7 days, please, when you sign up online, type in the promo code, and write this down if you would, SBOT20. Okay, so no caps, just SBOT for Surrey Board of Trade, 20, and the number 2 and the number 0. If you put in the promo code, you'll get a 20% discount of the subscription price. So if you're a small to mid-sized business, normal price, if it's 50 or less employees, would be $5,000 Canadian a year for the subscription. You would get $1,000 knocked off by being a business and a member of Surrey Board of Trade, which is very significant. So offering that to you as another incentive to get into compliance and get your business secure. The other thing we'll say is that if you sign up with us, we'll help you get some of the investment back. So Canada has a new digital adoption program, CDAP, and there are 2 programs, and we'll help you get the money. One is called Grow Your Business Online, and you can get a micro grant for $2,400 if you have less than $500,000 in revenues. So signing for CyberCatch, you can actually get a grant for $2,500, and we'll help you fill that out. And so that's another opportunity that you have to lower your investment, if you will. The other one is if you have $500,000 or more in revenues, then you can fall under the Boost Your Business Technology program, and you can get up to 90% of your investment, up to $15,000. So if you're a large organization, let's say you pay $10,000 per year for CyberCatch because of the size, you could get 90% of that back, up to $15,000, under that program. That's available because Canada is incenting you to go digital, but be secure. So those are programs available. Reach out to us. Our team will sign you up, or you can sign up online. We can give you a demo and get you secure. So this is the patriotic thing to do in Canada, of course, but the smart thing to do. So let's pull together as a team, if you will, Canada team, and get Canada secure and show the world how we can do it right. So with that, back to you, Anita.
Thank you so much, Sai, Andy, and Brian. Sai, my first question to you is, when will these national compliance standards become law?
Right, so they are already in effect today. And so CIO Strategy Council has published the standards, and this is the first step. So the government is really saying is, look, we don't want to have to put in penalties for non-compliance yet. So let's get the standards out, let's get you compliant, and therefore you can be secure, but also prove that you are thinking smart and being proactive, and you're a well-run organization. So what we are going to anticipate here soon is that this will be part of the Canada Secure Program, Cyber Secure Program, where businesses will be allowed to put up a seal because they've implemented the standard. And so that will be sort of the closer step to getting everybody into compliance. But I think the adoption will drive whether there will be a regulation that will implement this and penalties. If the adoption is slow, then I think the government's going to come back with a regulation and tie in some penalties. So I think it's better that we as businesses and as a community, implement the standard because it's the smart thing to do and the right thing to do versus wait for the government to come in with penalties because nobody benefits from that. But that's would be the guidance, is just implement the standard and to start to comply, but then there'll be a seal that'll be provided shortly here soon.
And Brian, my next question is to you. When, in your experience, when someone or a business calls the RCMP about a ransomware type of situation that they faced, how can they get their information back without paying the ransom? What is going on the ground as it relates to that?
That's a great question. And, in in speaking and preparing for this event, our recommendation is never to pay a ransom. Having said that, I recognize that there's business owners out there that they need to get up and running. So I think that's going to be an individual choice. We would always advise against it. You're essentially aiding and abetting and organized crime. That's who's doing this. This is organized crime on a global level. So that's going to be a difficult call. Again, it reiterates the need for preventative measures. So you're not in that position and you don't get in that position. Again, we don't think twice about taking other steps to harden our businesses, such as locks on doors. And I think we have to evolve in that regard. But when a business is online, facing a threat to its existential existence, if you continue to remain offline and not access, that's going to be a very difficult decision for people to make. It's no different than an abduction involving a person. This is just far more difficult to deal with than that.
And Brian, one more question to you is, when there's international actors in play as it relates to cyber crimes, some of our larger businesses have faced this, is how do policing agencies deal with international actors when it comes to cybercrime?
That's where the coordination, international coordination, is absolutely critical. I've indicated earlier in my comments how many requests NC3 has received from both domestic and external law enforcement agencies, external to Canada. So cooperation is absolutely necessary there. But as you go around the world, depending on the sophistication of the police agencies and apparatuses that they have, there's varying degrees of success to be able to track this. Some countries are well behind us on this. So you're chasing something, you're chasing a horse that's already out of the barn in those instances. And there's nation states that are actors. So again, the prevention, just like we know on anything else, when we look at education, prevention, whether that be involvement in gangs, it's so much easier to do it at the outset. So there'll be varying degrees of success with that, and it's going to look at and the threshold for investing the resources in that is going to relate to the degree of impact that it has. Resources are strained for policing across the globe, so it's going to be a challenge, and the resources are going to go to the most extreme cases.
Andy, my next question to you, and it relates to the need, especially for small and medium-sized businesses, to be able to understand the extreme importance of not only complying with these standards issued by the federal government, but what's your advice to businesses that are not taking this seriously today?
Yeah, it's really important to, I think a lot of people, when they think of cybersecurity, they think of it as a IT problem or a technology problem. The reality is today, all businesses are digital. There's not a single business that I have ever interacted with where they can safely say, oh, no, we don't use a computer in our business. While there are, of course, some exceptions. But by and large, because we live in a digital first world, the cybersecurity problem is a business problem, and it's a preeminent business first problem. Because again, if your IT systems are unavailable, if your data is unavailable, if the ability to just perform the act of accounting, which is also digital, and or your HR systems that manage your employees, that's unavailable today, that's a catastrophic event for any business. And the threat landscape today is such is that can happen today. It can happen now. And I believe that savvy business owners will think of cybersecurity as a business enabling event, not just oh, I can make this technical problem go away if I buy this and that and the other tool. It's not that way. And in fact, Canada CIOSC standard makes an incredible point at the very beginning. It explicitly says what I just said. Cybersecurity is a business problem and needs to be solved as such, not a technical discussion with the IT team to figure out how do we prevent ourselves from ransomware. It has to be a business discussion, and that's how businesses succeed. Clearly, the standard helps, but the ultimate goal is to have small and mid-sized businesses succeed at what they're incredibly good at, which is creating jobs, creating revenue, and maintaining the ability to consistently generate revenue without the interruption of these cyber attacks. So I hope that adds some color to your question, Anita.
And I'd also like to mention that there are local IT companies that are part of the Surrey Board of Trade membership that can help find those backup data solutions, security controls, so that you can comply with these new national compliance standards. It's very important, as one of our attendees articulated in the chat function, is to have a separate offsite backup of all of your data to reduce the need to pay a ransom. So, a very complex issue, but so important even for the one-person business, all the way to the largest business that we have in Canada. And Sai, any concluding remarks before we adjourn?
Thank you so much, Anita. And I think Andy touched on it. I'll just elaborate. One of the keys to success is to think from a business point of view. And one of the things to think about the standard is it's making your business safer, but also better. Because by going through this process, you'll be able to identify the gaps that you have. You'll be able to identify some efficiencies, some fine tuning that you need to do. And we frequently see that's the result when we go through this process with one of our customers, is they're better off than they were when they started this journey, because now they have really controls in place. They know where their information is. They know how they can protect it, and they make really smart decisions. So they're much safer and leaner and better off. So I think that's a key takeaway that we must make sure that the audience understands as the value. And the last part is that we at CyberCatch, as you pointed out, Anita, are partnering with already the providers out there. So we're not replacing anybody. What we're doing is we're complementing what's out there. So a lot of businesses have MSPs, managed services providers, and others. We fill the little bit of a void that exists with cybersecurity. That's what we do. So it's not replacing anybody, it's partnering together and making the country safer.
And Brian, any concluding remarks from you? And just one question in the chat function is, does the RCMP find out who does the ransomware? And have they been charged? Is there a penalty in your experience?
Yes, we do that. So we had a recent case out of Quebec, which is actually a domestic actor in that case that is now facing charges. But if you look at the overall number of offenses and the likelihood of being charged, admittedly, it is low just because of the challenges that are there. So I think as a concluding remark, what I would say is I would ask people to sort of frame it up in the steps that they already take. And I was thinking, as I was listening to this, that the damage that could be done to someone's business, and my dad was a small business owner, arguably you could leave your door unlocked and face at night and face less of a risk to your systems than leaving your computer systems unlocked or access to it, because they could come in and there would be physical damage or removal of items, but nobody would even think of doing that. So again, I think that the proper attention to preventing this is really what is important, so that as this evolves and investigative techniques evolve, go back to the 3 items that I spoke about, what deters and prevents crime. And all three of those traditional ways that we look at that are compromised in the case of cybercrime. So I think you put that all together and make decisions that are most appropriate for the individual and for the businesses. Those will be my final comments. Thank you, Anita.
Thank you so much, Brian. And Andy, any concluding remarks? And just to address in your concluding remarks, the CyberCatch, your solution is also available to the not-for-profit sector as well. And I know CyberCatch is partnering with the federal government. Someone wants to know if there's a Canadian entity version of it. So Andy, over to you.
Yeah, I think from a Canadian perspective, we do have offices in Vancouver as well. So, and in terms of the Canadian version of it, we have the platform which serves as the version for Canada CIOSC. So from a platform perspective, the answer is yes and yes. We're located in Vancouver.
Thank you so much, Cy, Brian, and Andy for speaking to us. Are there communication to Surrey's business community, and of course, general outreach through our national head office, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, will be forthcoming. Check out the Board of Trade's website at businessinsurrey.com, especially our Cybersecurity Center of Excellence section on our website for more information on how you can take advantage of this tool to protect your business and your organization. Thank you so much for attending.